Up first, we will have Attorney General candidate Kim Ahern come up and introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. Well, I met most of you when I walked in, but not everyone, so I'll stick around after and I hope I can chat with everyone here. My name is Kim Ahern. As the chair said, I'm running for Attorney General in Rhode Island. And so whether you already know about our campaign or you're here to learn more, I'm just grateful that you're here and that I have the opportunity to speak with you for a little bit tonight. I'm going to try to save time of what was allotted for some questions, because I think that's the best way to really get to know someone. But at its core, the Rhode Island Attorney General, most important job is to keep Rhode Islanders safe. And so that means protecting us from not just violent crime and criminals, but that means also when this administration attacks our fundamental rights and values and way of life. And so my entire career has been dedicated to keeping Rhode Islanders safe. I've served as a prosecutor under the past 3 attorneys general, and as a legal counsel to the last 2 governors and the head of a new state agency. And every step of the way, what I've done in my career is worked very hard to keep our communities safe, our systems fair, and our values strong. So to talk a little bit about my time at the Attorney General's office, which is the office I'm running to lead, I really had the honor of serving there for just shy of a decade. I worked for 3 attorneys general, Patrick Lynch, Peter Carmartin, and Peter Nerono. I specialized in what is now called the Special Victims Unit there. And so I personally prosecuted over 1,000 criminal cases in my time there. Most of those cases involved what are in that SVU unit, so domestic violence, murder, sexual assault, animal abuse. I also got to overlap and train police academies in civil rights and anti-Semitism and LGBTQ awareness and hate crimes, and also some environmental crime work as well. And so one case that stays with me ever since I've been there, and as I embark on this new part of running for office for the very first time, by the way, is a guy named Curtis Maxey. And so Curtis Maxey was a man from Pawtucket, and he spent a lot of time in downtown Providence, actually right in Kennedy Plaza, right outside of City Hall. And he did that to look for and find this young girl that I'm about to describe to you, because that's exactly who he was looking for. A girl that didn't have any adults in her life that cared about her, a girl that was a runaway from every system that DCOF put her in, and he found her and he lured her back to his apartment in Pawtucket, which actually was within eyesight of the Pawtucket Police Department. And then he sexually assaulted her, and then he sold her online for others to do the same to her in an awful website called Backpage. When I got that case with the police officers of the Pawtucket Police Department, we worked that case day and night for years. And we did so not just because it was the right thing to do, but to show this young girl that in Rhode Island that she had adults and people in her community and government that cared about her and would stand up for her. And when he was convicted of that horrendous crime and he was sentenced to 100 years in jail, it sent a message, not just that we're gonna stand up for our most vulnerable, and in particular her, but that we are gonna protect our most vulnerable community. And for me, it reminded me why the work of the Attorney General matters. It's not abstract, and it's actually not political. It mattered to her, and it matters to the kind of community that we want to raise our kids in and have our communities safe in. After doing that work for just under a decade, I had the opportunity and the honor to go work at the State House for Governor Gina Raimondo. And so I was a legal counsel for her, and what I did for her initially and what I did for the state was actually work on reforming the criminal justice system. So the same system that I just spent about 9.5 years being a part of, knowing that it has its shortcomings, knowing that it has its flaws, of course. And so we formed a working group made up of nonprofits, of the judiciary, of public defenders, of defense attorneys, and we got to work to look through ways that we could be more I think, supportive of folks leaving the system, and in particular around our juvenile justice system, trying to infuse more mental health supports into that system. And in particular for adults that were leaving the ACI, it's called the reentry system, trying to give meaningful pathways to employment, because we know that the best way to keep our recidivism rate down, to keep people from going back to jail, is to put them on a pathway to a good job. And so that was what I was doing until March of 2020. When everything changed for everyone, including everyone in this room and everyone in the world, when the COVID-19 crisis hit and struck. And so the governor's office in Rhode Island is actually very small. It's only about 35 or so people. And so when you saw Governor Raimondo leading kind of the state's response at that time, it was a very small group behind her, actually. And so I was tasked with leading what was called an individual supports work stream. And that the role of that was to really infuse our COVID relief dollars into our systems to care for our most vulnerable, to care for the individuals that didn't have shelter, that couldn't quarantine and isolate, that didn't have the opportunity to have DoorDash or Instacart delivered to them. And so we had to set up systems very quickly to help support our most vulnerable Rhode Islanders. And I'm proud of the work that we did then. As you all probably know, especially in Cumberland, that we had an unexpected transition at the highest level of government at that time, when Governor Raimondo was selected to become Commerce Secretary, and Governor McKee became governor. He asked me to stay on and be his Deputy Chief of Staff and work in one of his top policy priorities, which is housing. And I'm really proud of the work we did together across the state with nonprofits and executive branch agencies to build thousands of new units at all different price points. But we know that we have a lot more work to do in this area. We know that Rhode Island is not affordable. I'm really worried about my kids' kids, about being able to stay and work here and live here. And so that's part of the work I did in the governor's office. In 2023, the state of Rhode Island debated for many years whether or not we should legalize adult use cannabis. And the General Assembly, after much debate, decided to do so after about 5 years of kind of delving into different proposals. And so they legalized adult use cannabis in 2022, and they formed a brand new state agency. And that brand new state agency was called the Cannabis Control Commission. And I'm really proud that the governor selected me to be the very first head of that agency. I was confirmed twice by the Rhode Island State Senate. I saw Senator Pearson here earlier, but to do that work. And that I was entrusted to be the first leader of that new agency. And so every step of the way in that role, we kept public safety, transparency, and equity at the forefront of every decision we made, while also spurring economic development for the state of Rhode Island. So I think all of those experiences uniquely prepare me to walk into the Attorney General's office. But it will not be those experiences that I'm thinking about, should I be so lucky and honored to do that next year. It will be my 3 daughters. So I have 3 young daughters, 10, 8, and 2. And like any parent or caregiver in the crowd, or anyone that has like grandkids or kids in their life at all, you're probably not unlike me, where you think about them every day. And you think about the world they're growing up in. You think about their safety in particular, and whether they'll have access to these beautiful coastlines in Rhode Island, or whether they'll have the ability to have accessible health care. I think about the technology that they're being exposed to on a daily basis. And of course, for their safety, in the sense of, just last week, my second grader got a notice on our app that we should talk to her about the school shooter drill she was about to have the next day. And this is just the reality of what it's like to be a parent right now, raising kids in this world. And so I think about their safety every day, and that's another reason why I am running to be the next Attorney General. To go back for a moment, I moved to Rhode Island to go to college. I went to Providence College here, and I fell in love with the state, and I fell in love with my wife, and we decided to make this our home, and that's what I've been doing every day since. I then went to law school at Roger Williams in Bristol, and have been serving the state of Rhode Island every day since in the capacities that you just heard me talk about here. My very first job actually as a lawyer was at the Rhode Island Supreme Court, and I was a clerk for a judge of our highest court in Rhode Island. And so in closing, because I do want to, if the chair's okay with this, I'd like to get to some questions and answer. In closing, I'll say this, that Rhode Island is extraordinarily lucky in this election year, I think. To have so many well-qualified candidates, and I'm grateful to be here tonight with a neighbor of mine in Providence, woman and a dog, but Rhode Island is extraordinarily lucky to have so many well-qualified Democrats running for Attorney General this year. And I don't have anything bad to say about anyone else who's running for this office. For me, it comes down to who is ready to lead on day one. And so I'm the only candidate in this race who's been a prosecutor under the past 3 attorneys general. I'm the only candidate in this race who's been a legal counsel to the last 2 governors, and I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually been the head of a state agency. And at its core, the Attorney General's office is actually a very large state agency as well. For me, the job is not 9 to 5. It's a job that you answer the call no matter the time, day or night, no matter week, weekend. And it's the job that matters in times of crisis. And what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about, a brand new Attorney General who's only been elected 6 weeks prior, gets the call that there's a fire in West Warwick and 100 people are dead. Thinking about a bad economic development deal, potentially, that was struck at the State House, and whether or not that should be investigated in a grand jury proceeding. And so it's the type of role where you really want a leader who's been through a time of crisis, that you know you can trust, and is that ready to lead through that. I know I'm ready for that, and with your help and support, hopefully I can get there. And so I'd love to answer some questions or have a conversation, whatever the committee would like to do. Oh, thank you.
Sarah.
So when I think about things that will be important for me, for an Attorney General to care about, one issue that's close to my heart particularly is domestic violence. And so when you think about laws that we already have in Rhode Island that you would want to see safeguarded and protected, what do those look like? And then when you think about new protections that you think that would be helpful and valuable for victims of domestic violence, what do those look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's what I spent the vast majority of my career doing. Most of my cases were in fact domestic violence cases. And it's super troubling just when you look at the data around and the statistics around domestic violence. I think it's like 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women have been, if asked, been exposed in some way, shape, or form to domestic violence. And that's horrific and it's really troubling. And our state has done a number of things that really have moved, I think, the ability to prosecute these crimes forward. But it's always really about the person and it's about the response. And if we as a state are providing enough resources, in particular when survivors of intimate violence or victims of domestic violence are trying to leave a relationship. And that's what I was always most concerned about as a prosecutor. And so the cases I was prosecuting were our most serious domestic violence offenses in the state, where there's mandatory minimums. For example, if you are convicted of that, this what's called a third offense domestic law in Rhode Island, for folks that know that. And it basically means if you've already offended in this way, it elevates the crime to a felony the 3rd time with a mandatory year in jail. So I think our state has really kind of pushed, I think, but there's always more to be done. I know there's always more to be done because if you talk to our coalitions against domestic violence and you go to their events, you can see that there's not enough supports. You can see that there's not enough access to housing and the ability to leave and access to counsel and access to like all the things that someone needs when they leave a violent relationship. And that's the hardest part for any victim. And that's the part where it's most lethal for them. And this is documented. One of the trainings we went to when I was a prosecutor was to study a lethality assessment. And basically it was an assessment we were trying to implement for all police departments in the state so that they had a score, a ranking basically that they could do when a victim in a crime was being investigated. So you could see like what factors had ticked off and you could use some evidence-based practices to see like how dangerous of a situation this was. Yeah, it made sense. But I think, like, in terms of your question, I think it's like the next Attorney General needs to be vigilant in this area, needs to be a fighter in this area, needs to stand up for survivors of domestic violence. And then I would focus around kind of the additional supports that are needed. And I'm thinking about the Treasurer, too. Treasurer's Office does amazing work. I worked very closely with the Treasurer's Office in helping victims of domestic violence get access to some of the hard work that they do every day. People don't go there to make a lot of money. You could do that elsewhere in the law. People go there because they're driven by mission, they're driven by service, and that's why I went there. And when you work there, you have a tremendous amount of work. Well, when I was a prosecutor, any given day I would have about 150 cases assigned to me. And that's not unusual across the staff there. And so I was grateful at the time when I was there that we had access to special kind of like trainings and career development outside of the courtroom, because that's really where you learn and kind of improve your skill set. And so I would definitely want to find ways to support the staff in that way. And then, make it a fun place to work, like it always has been. Just like I think any job, you want to have the ability to feel like you're making a difference and also enjoy the work. I'll offer this too, just because your question strikes at kind of more the internal dynamics of the Attorney General's office. I hope you can tell from the short time I've been talking, I'm very passionate about the office. I actually love the work of the Attorney General's office, and I loved working there. I worked there, as I said, for just shy of a decade. I feel like when I was there that I grew up both professionally and personally. And what do I mean by that? It was my first job when I was like a baby lawyer, so to speak. But when I went there, I wasn't married. Both my parents were still alive. I didn't have kids. And by the time I left, I lost a parent, I gained a spouse, and I've had 2 of 3 children. And every part of that experience, I grew up professionally as well, in kind of turning into the lawyer that I am today. And I felt incredibly supported by the staff that are at the Attorney General's office. And so I just think it's a great place to work, and I think it's a great question, Rep, in terms of what we can do to support. And I would, of course, come to the General Assembly and advocate for more staff. So I'll definitely reach out to you. Yeah.
Lisa.
So I have a question. Obviously, there's been some conflicts between the governor and the Attorney General that have been very public. And one of particular interest to me was the ILO contract. And as I understand it, the Attorney General had determined that the governor's office had violated the procurement laws. And is it your opinion that those laws were violated?
One, I think the Attorney General didn't bring any charges in that.
Right.
And so that would be kind of how I would start with this. But then in terms of just to take a step back with the relationship between the governor's office and the Attorney General's office, I think that's a really critical relationship. And I think it's a great question, because the next Attorney General will be incumbent upon the next Attorney General to work with the governor and whoever the governor is. I was asked about this recently on a news show. One part, in the 6 minutes I try to talk about the office, I can't cover obviously everything that the office does, but a really important statutory and legal duty of the Attorney General's office is to represent all general office holders, including the governor, and all state agencies, all executive branch agencies. And so that's a duty that I'll take really seriously, and will need to work very closely with any general officer, including lieutenant governor or governor, in defending any kind of actions or issues and things that come up, of course, along the way. That's kind of part of the role I had in the Cannabis Commission. And so I think it's really important question, because I think we can see how the governor and the Attorney General, when working together, can really make a difference for Rhode Island, and can really bring in investments to Rhode Island, and can fight for Rhode Island when this administration oversteps every bound that we already talked about. And I didn't, just personally, just to answer your question, I wasn't involved in ILO when I was in the governor's office, and I wasn't at the AG's office when it was being investigated, so I wasn't in either of those roles. So I'm relying, just like you are, on what's available publicly. So, yeah.
How do you address when there's conflicts between the two departments and a difference of opinion? If you were the Attorney General and faced a situation where you determined something was violated and the governor's office felt otherwise, how do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on the individual conflict. The question brings up kind of the different divisions and different parts of the AG's office that I was talking about earlier, right? So the AG's office plays a really important role. That's the part that I actually did in investigating crimes in Rhode Island. And then it also separately has the role that we were just talking about, where it represents all general office holders. And so, yeah, if there is conflict, then the next Attorney General needs to be aware of it, right? And needs to be able to determine if there's a conflict that can't actually proceed, right? Then you have to take a different path. But I guess how I would say this is that my entire career has been dedicated to consensus building. And I've always gathered people around the table with different opinions, including people that didn't agree with me, in particular in the candidate's role. And I ran public meetings once a month with all different stakeholders, with all different opinions. And I really value kind of like everyone having a seat at the table and having an active role in kind of informing what is the best path forward and then making decision and moving forward. And I'm honestly really, when I look to neighboring states, which so many people in this state do in the General Assembly, I'm really impressed by the dynamic, between Governor Maura Healey and Attorney General Andrea Campbell, and that's 100% the kind of Attorney General I expect to be.
I just want to piggyback on that.
Yeah.
So clearly, when that happened, the Attorney General didn't find any illegalities.
Yes.
But went beyond that and he opined on the situation.
Yeah.
Appropriate, not appropriate?
It's a good question. I think,
No, I understand, I don't want to interrupt you, but like my solicitor at the
Yeah.
town,
yeah,
the job of the solicitor is to defend the positions that we take, right?
Yeah.
Even if they might be somewhat questionable, right? I mean, she's gonna defend the administration, right?
yeah.
Is that how you feel? I mean, you talk about the general offices, I mean, is it your job to defend the decisions of the administration? And so if it's not illegal, then you just leave it at that?
Well, I think.
Clearly, he went beyond that.
Yes, yeah, he did. I was thinking, I don't know as much about the solicitor relationship in your, what you were bringing up with, in this town. What I was thinking about was, I told you all I've done thousands of criminal cases. I've actually led grand jury investigations in the state. I have led grand jury investigations where I put a case into the grand jury and the grand jury did not indict. Significant cases, sexual assaults, where we had a victim who was telling me and telling the grand jurors that she was sexually assaulted. And the grand jurors did their job and they said, there's not enough here. You don't have it. The government can't prove this. They gave a no true bill, which is the legal term for there's not a criminal case. And in that case, I obviously went out of the grand jury and I broke this news to this very troubled woman, and she was devastated. And then I went back to my desk at the Attorney General's office and I moved on to my next case. Because I think that your question gets to kind of, in my opinion, the fundamental rights that we have in our criminal justice system, where if someone is accused of a crime and then there's not a crime, that's it. You know, you can't move on. You can't, as a prosecutor, you can't go out and say, well, I don't agree with the grand jury, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to say that there is a crime. And so that's what I'm thinking about when you ask that question.
What about the political side of it, though, where no one trusts anybody anymore, and so it's
No
not
interest.
illegal. There's no proof that it's illegal, right? Just because you can't prove it illegal doesn't mean it was right, right? So that my point is,
Yeah.
the Attorney General took an opportunity to, even though it couldn't prove it was illegal, clearly stated that it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Is that appropriate or is that not appropriate?
Well,
It's really one or the other.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, and I understand both sides of it, but it's really that simple. It's appropriate.
It's not what I would say. Yeah, and it wasn't there. I didn't do the investigation. I don't have everything that he had, so thank you. Yeah.
How many people work with the Cannabis Commission? We call it a state agency.
Yeah, it is a state agency. There's about 26 employees there. Yeah, and we,
Is there a director or are you the director?
I was the head of the state
You're the
agency.
chairman of the commission.
I'm the chairperson of the Cannabis Control Commission is a full-time state employee. And so it's the head of the state agency that existed when the General Assembly legalized, yeah. Yeah.
28,
What's that?
28 in 2 years? How many years has it been since they passed it?
They passed it in 2022, the Commission formed in 2023, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
What distinguishes your vision for the Attorney General's office compared to others?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the beginning.
What distinguishes your vision for the Attorney General's office compared to others in the race?
Yeah, I haven't heard that many others talk yet, right? It's still such a new race, to be clear. We haven't had any debates or anything. And so I could just really speak to my own vision, which is grounded in these three pillars. It's grounded in, one, keeping Rhode Island safe. Safe meaning safe from not just crime, but safe from the administration. Two, it would be supporting and protecting our fundamental rights and freedoms. And then three, it would be supporting working families. I'm really concerned about the rising costs across our state in healthcare, in utility bills, in groceries and gas. And so the Attorney General has a unique role to play in each of those. And I think the next Attorney General needs to stand up and be ready to address all of them. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Councilman.
So we've kind of been sort of touching upon what the context of my question was going to be with the other questions, but in the past the AG's office has like sort of butt heads with the governor's office on topics. You've worked with both offices in your resume. So when voters are asking you, do you support the current leadership, and if you were to, if you were to, let me rephrase this. That is the question. So if voters are asking you,
Yeah.
Are you supporting the continuity of the current leadership, or do you think the Rhode Islanders need to change based upon what's been happening between the two offices?
Need a change in the Attorney General's office?
In the governor's office.
Got it. Yeah, I would say this. I was actually just asked that recently too. I said, one, like I went over here earlier, I'm grateful that the governor and the state senate entrusted me to lead this new agency. But I think it's really important for the next Attorney General to be able to work with whoever the next governor is. And I think that because of that statutory duty that I was already talking about, that the AG has a role that we've talked about a little bit to represent any general office holder. I think I just want to be able to work with whoever ends up as the governor. And so I think I can work very well with this governor, of course, because I already worked with him. But that's my perspective on the race. And I also think secondarily, like I offered at the beginning, like I am going to be focusing on my race. Never run for office before. It's the only office I would ever run for at this point in my life. And so my focus is going to be on the Attorney General's office as I'm talking to voters around the state over the next 9 months. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said one of your pillars is supporting working families. Like,
Yeah.
how do you see that from the Attorney General's role?
Yeah, the Attorney General has a number of really important statutory duties. So one is the Attorney General can and should intervene at the Public Utilities Commission when utilities are trying to raise our rates, which is happening right now as we speak in this winter. When I was in the office under the prior two AGs, we actually had a unit that was embedded full-time at the DPUC and at the PUC. And that was, I thought, very helpful to be like on the ground at all times, to keep eyes and ears on what's happening at the PUC and the DPUC. And so that's something certainly that I would give great deal of thought to reestablishing that as a unit, and continue the work of intervening when the utility companies come in and want to raise our rates. I'm sure you, just like me, experiencing much higher heating and gas rates this winter. That's one. Two, we have a separate body in Rhode Island called the Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner. And so not totally dissimilar from the PUC that we were just discussing. It's an entity that is there to kind of regulate our health insurance rates. And so the Attorney General can also intervene at the Office of Health Insurance Commissioner. And that's the type of work that I would 100% do as the Attorney General, to stand up when our health insurance bills are also going up and up and up, to say to, you know, the big insurance companies, no, this is not fair, and no, you cannot do this. So definitely utilities and health insurance. And then also, I mean, supporting working families also in terms of union protections, and making sure, like, in working families, in particular ones that are in unions, know that the Attorney General's office is there if there's any issues of misclassification or felony wage theft, when, you know, you don't get what you actually work for. And so those are a few things that come to my mind right off the top of the head. But there's lots of ways that the Attorney General's office can be an advocate for working families in Rhode Island.
Anyone else?
All right. Thank you so much,